Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It means the world to me as I can continue to write stories like these. I will not spoil it, but I think the ending will leave you shocked. Let me know if you enjoyed it in the comments, and don't forget to let me know where you're watching from.
Arrival and abandonment. The air around Harmony Creek carried the scent of evergreen and moist soil, a welcome change from the sooty atmosphere Lily had always known. She descended from the train, clutching her faded carpetbag, its once vibrant floral design obscured by grime. Her pulse quickened, a frantic counterpoint to the fragile optimism blossoming in her soul. Smoothing the fabric of her newly sewn blue dress, crafted specifically for this day, she surveyed the quiet depot. No Thomas. His letters had painted a picture, a tall man, blessed with gentle eyes and a rebellious sweep of brown hair. Among the scattering of townsfolk, farmers in work clothes, women laden with baskets of fresh goods, and a cluster of wide-eyed children, she sought that familiar image but found no match. A prickle of anxiety danced in her stomach. Perhaps a delay was the explanation. Straightening her shoulders, she attempted to project a composure she didn't possess as the remaining passengers alighted, met their parties, and vanished along the dirt road that led into town. With a metallic groan, the train released steam, then lumbered back from whence it came, leaving Lily alone on the platform. A portly man, the station master, sporting a thick walrus mustache and an air of perpetual weariness, appeared from the small building, wiping his hands on a rag. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice rough around the edges. "I'm Lily Bellwether," she replied, her voice wavering slightly. "I was expecting to meet Thomas here." The station master's brow creased. He consulted a clipboard, the pages whispering as he flipped through them. "Bellwether, you say? We haven't heard about a Bellwether. Or any Thomas expecting company. Which Thomas would that be? Just Thomas?" Lily murmured, her cheeks warming. She hadn't even considered using his surname, caught up in her own romantic notions. We were to be wed." The man sighed, a gust of air that disturbed his mustache. "Sorry, miss. No messages, no inquiries. If he was expecting you, he didn't mention it to us." He tapped the clipboard with his pen. "Maybe he's held up. It happens." Lily forced a smile, a poor imitation of the real thing. "Yes, perhaps. I'll just wait a little longer." The station master shrugged and retreated into the station house, leaving Lily to her solitude. The sun blazed down on the platform, with radiating heat, intensifying the woodsy aroma. The sounds of Harmony Creek, birdsong, the distant mooing of cattle seemed to amplify her growing apprehension. An hour slipped by, then another. The platform, once bustling with activity, was now completely deserted. The lively conversations had quietened, supplanted by an unsettling quiet. Lily settled on a wooden bench, her carpetbag at her feet, her gaze fixed on the road leading to town. Each approaching cart, each distant silhouette ignited a spark of hope, only to be extinguished by a wave of disappointment. She reread Thomas's letters, the paper crackling in her trembling fingers. His words, once a source of comfort, now rang hollow, almost cruel in their cheer. He had depicted a welcoming home, a life brimming with affection and laughter. He told of a modest farm, a charming cottage with roses climbing the walls, and a heart longing to share it all with her. Had she been naive to trust him? Had her eagerness for a fresh existence blinded her to the warning signs, the ambiguity in his descriptions, the absence of a proper surname? Tears pricked her eyes, blurring the ink on the page. She swiped them away fiercely, refusing to surrender to despair. He still might arrive. There could be a perfectly valid reason. A family emergency, a broken axle, an unforeseen crisis. As the sun began its descent, stretching long shadows across the platform, Lily's optimism dwindled to a tiny ember. The air cooled and a shiver ran through her, both physical and emotional. The station master reemerged, this time with a lantern in hand. "The train isn't scheduled again till morning, miss," he said, his tone softening slightly. "You can stay inside the waiting room if you like. It's not much, but it's dry." Lily simply shook her head, unable to muster a single word. The enormity of her predicament pressed down on her, suffocating her spirit. He wasn't coming. She knew that now. She had journeyed hundreds of miles, carrying her hopes and dreams in a humble carpetbag, only to be abandoned on a desolate platform. The station master sighed again, a sound that seemed to mirror the void in her soul. "Suit yourself," he said, and retreated back inside, leaving Lily alone in the deepening gloom. She rose, her limbs stiff and achy. She picked up her carpetbag, its weight now seeming unbearable. Harmony Creek, the haven she had pictured, now felt like a trap. The aspirations she had cherished, the future she had envisioned, lay in fragments at her feet, as worthless as dust motes. A figure materialized from the shadows, walking slowly towards the station. It wasn't Thomas. This man was older, his face etched with the marks of time and experience, his eyes radiating kindness, accompanied by a large shepherd dog that trotted obediently by his side. He halted a short distance away, his gaze resting on Lily, a kindred spirit. Silas leaned against the dusty wall of the Harmony Creek Freight Depot, Gus's head resting heavily on his worn-out boot. The air hung thick and heavy, promising rain before nightfall. He was waiting on a new plow blade, delayed as usual, and the rhythmic tick of the station clock was beginning to grate on his nerves. He'd noticed her the moment she stepped off the train. A splash of city color against the faded backdrop of Harmony Creek. Her floral dress, though travel-worn, was finer than anything usually seen in these parts, and the small valise at her feet looked equally out of place. But it wasn't her clothes that caught his attention, it was the way her shoulders slumped, the way she scanned the sparse crowd with a growing desperation in her eyes. Gus whined softly, lifting his head. Silas scratched behind his ears, his gaze returning to the young woman. She was clearly expecting someone, and that someone clearly wasn't coming. A knot of unease tightened in his chest. He knew that feeling of being adrift, of having the ground pulled out from under you. After what felt like an eternity, the woman sank onto a nearby bench, her face buried in her hands. Gus nudged Silas's hand with his wet nose, his brown eyes full of concern. Silas sighed. "All right, boy. Let's see if we can help." He straightened his back, adjusted his worn hat, and with Gus padding silently at his heels, walked towards her. As he drew closer, he could hear the woman's soft sobs. Her distress was a tangible thing, hanging in the humid air. "Ma'am?" Silas's voice was quiet, rough around the edges from years of disuse. The woman startled, lifting her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, her cheeks streaked with tears. She looked younger up close, barely more than a girl. I'm waiting for Thomas," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Thomas Bellwether." Silas's brow furrowed. He knew most folks in Harmony Creek, and the name didn't ring a bell. "Don't believe I know any Bellwethers around here, ma'am." Her face crumpled again. He said he'd be here." Silas hesitated, unsure how to proceed. He wasn't one for fancy words or empty promises. "Train might be late," he offered, though he knew in his heart that wasn't the case. She shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "No. He wouldn't." Gus, sensing her distress, nudged her hand with his nose, letting out a soft whimper. The woman looked down at him, a flicker of something akin to hope in her eyes. She reached out a tentative hand and stroked his fur. Gus leaned into her touch, his tail giving a tentative wag. Silas watched them for a moment, a plan forming in his mind. "Look, ma'am," he said, his voice a little firmer now. "The depot's closing up for the night. Why don't you come on over to Martha's Diner? I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we can figure something out." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. What she saw, apparently, was only kindness. I don't have much money," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Silas gave a dismissive wave of his hand. "Coffee's on me. Come on. Gus will keep you company." He picked up her valise, the leather surprisingly light, and gestured towards the main street. She hesitated for another moment, then rose to her feet, Gus trotting faithfully by her side. Martha's Diner was a haven of warmth and light in the gathering dusk. The smell of frying bacon and strong coffee hung in the air, a comforting aroma that momentarily eased the tension in Lily's shoulders. Martha Higgins, a woman whose sharp tongue was legendary in Harmony Creek, stood behind the counter, polishing a coffee mug with unnecessary vigor. She watched Silas and the young woman enter with thinly veiled curiosity, her eyes narrowed behind her thick spectacles. Silas led Lily to a booth in the back, away from the prying eyes of the other patrons. Gus settled down at her feet, his presence a silent reassurance. Silas slid into the booth across from her. "Martha," he called out, his voice carrying across the diner. "2 coffees, please." Martha grunted in response, her gaze never leaving Lily. She poured 2 steaming mugs and brought them over, setting them down with a resounding clunk. "Something I can help you with, Silas?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Silas took a sip of his coffee, ignoring Martha's pointed stare. "Just catching up with a visitor, Martha." Martha snorted. "A visitor, huh? Don't see too many of those around these parts. Especially not ones dressed like that." She gave Lily another appraising look, her lips pursed. "Well, don't let me keep you. Holler if you need anything." She retreated back behind the counter, but Silas could feel her eyes on them. He turned back to Lily, who was staring down at her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "Don't mind Martha," he said quietly. "She's got a good heart even if she doesn't always show it." He paused, then added, "I'm Silas Harding, by the way." Lily looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. Her eyes, though still red and swollen, held a spark of something. Determination, perhaps? Or maybe just the faintest glimmer of hope. "Lily," she said softly. Lily Bellwether. Shared stories and silent comfort. The bell above the door of Martha's diner jingled, a cheerful counterpoint to the melancholy clinging to Lily. Silas led her to a booth in the back, the worn vinyl cool beneath her fingertips. The scent of frying bacon and strong coffee hung heavy in the air, a familiar comfort that did little to soothe the knot in Lily's stomach. Martha, a woman built like a sturdy oak, lumbered over with a pot of coffee already in hand. "Rough morning, Silas?" she asked, her voice a gravelly rumble. Silas merely nodded, his gaze fixed on Lily. Martha poured 2 mugs, the dark liquid steaming in the dim light. "On the house, darlin'," she said to Lily, her eyes softening with a hint of understanding. Silas waited until Martha retreated before speaking. "Cream? Sugar?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Lily shook her head. "Just black, please." She wrapped her hands around the warm mug, the heat seeping into her chilled fingers. She took a tentative sip, the bitterness a stark contrast to the sweetness she had envisioned for her life. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything." Silas simply nodded again, his gaze unwavering. He was a man of few words, she realized, but his eyes held a depth of kindness that was more comforting than any platitude. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversation from the other patrons. Finally, Silas spoke. "Thomas, he was supposed to meet you?" Lily swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it difficult to speak. "Yes. He wrote me letters. Beautiful letters about our life together, about the farm, about—" Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking back tears. "About love?" She recounted her story, the words tumbling out in a rush. Her family, struggling to make ends meet, had arranged the marriage to Thomas, a prosperous farmer from Harmony Creek. It was a practical arrangement, a chance for her to escape poverty and build a better future. She had envisioned a cozy cottage, fields of wildflowers, children laughing in the sunshine. "I even started sewing a quilt," she confessed, a ghost of a smile flitting across her lips. "Each patch represented a piece of my new life. A field of wheat, a robin's egg blue sky, a loving home." The smile vanished. "I guess I was a fool." Silas listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply sat there, a silent, unwavering presence. When she finished, the diner seemed to fall silent. Even Martha seemed to pause in her work, her gaze fixed on Lily. He said he wanted a wife who could bake bread and raise children," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "Someone strong and capable." She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "I thought I could be that woman." Silas finally broke the silence. "Sometimes," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "people ain't who they say they are." He paused, his gaze softening. "My wife. Sarah, she passed a few years back. Sudden illness. We had a good life. Simple, but good." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "She taught me that the best things in life ain't always the things you plan for." He didn't elaborate, but Lily sensed a deep well of grief beneath his stoic exterior. A shared understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of loss and disappointment. Suddenly, a wet nose nudged Lily's hand. Gus, who had been lying quietly at Silas's feet, looked up at her with soulful brown eyes. He whined softly, then rested his head on her lap, his warm fur a comforting weight. Lily stroked his soft fur, a small measure of solace in the overwhelming despair. "He's beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Silas managed a small, almost imperceptible smile. "He's a good dog." Gus nudged her hand again, as if sensing her sadness. Lily buried her face in his fur, letting the tears finally fall. Silas didn't say anything, didn't offer a platitude. He simply sat there, a silent guardian, while Gus offered the only comfort he knew how. In that moment, surrounded by the aroma of coffee and the quiet presence of a gentleman and his loyal dog, Lily felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't entirely alone. An unexpected haven. Silas observed Lily as she nursed her coffee, the rising vapor briefly softening the hard-won lines around her eyes. Sensing her distress, Gus bumped her hand with a damp nose, earning a weak smile. The diner, usually abuzz with neighborly chatter, was subdued, a silent acknowledgement of the grief that permeated the air. Silas broke the quiet with a deliberate cough. "Miss Bellwether, is it?" At her nod, her gaze still lost in the coffee's depths, he continued, "Do you have plans?" rarely offering more than the bare minimum. The vision of her, utterly alone, weighed on him. She shook her head, a fresh wave of sorrow darkening her expression. Nothing that matters, I suppose. He hesitated, wondering if he trespassed. I own a farm, just outside of town. It's peaceful. Room to spare. He glanced at Gus, whose tail provided a soft counterpoint against the floorboards, a silent endorsement. You're welcome to stay. For a while. Until you find your bearings. Her eyes widened, surprise momentarily eclipsing the pain. Stay? At your farm? I'd be intruding. Not at all, Silas countered, his voice firm, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. The spare room has been empty for longer than it should, and Gus seems to have adopted you. He added, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, hoping to ease her unease. The offer hung between them, a fragile bridge over her personal chasm. Lily weighed what passed as options, the reality being, she had none. Returning home was impossible. She couldn't endure their pity, their unspoken judgment. With nowhere else to turn, the abyss of utter solitude yawned before her. She studied Silas, the weathered map of his face softened by kindness, a profound understanding in his gaze. And then there was Gus, his warm presence a silent promise of solace. Are you certain? She whispered. Silas nodded, his gaze unwavering. Positive. I wouldn't extend the invitation otherwise. A surge of gratitude so potent it threatened to unlock a fresh torrent of tears flooded her. Then, I accept. Thank you, Silas. Mr. Harding. More than I can express. Silas, he corrected gently. And the pleasure's mine, Miss Bellwether. Lily. He settled the bill, and moments later they were settled into his well-worn wagon. Gus bounded into the back, releasing a contented sigh. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the fields as they left town behind. The road, barely more than a rutted track, snaked through gentle hills and past sprawling meadows. Lily gazed at the panorama, the sheer expanse of the countryside, a sharp contrast to the airless confinement she had felt back at the station. The breeze carried the clean, sharp scents of wildflowers and freshly tilled earth. As they traveled, Silas identified landmarks: an ancient oak, a stream renowned for its fishing, a neighbor's herd dotting a distant pasture. His commentary was sparse, but reassuring, anchoring her to this alien land. Lily found herself noticing the corded muscles in Silas's hands as he controlled the team, the sun-kissed skin of his neck just above his collar. There was an inherent stability to him, a quiet strength that soothed her. She wondered about his life, about whatever sorrow resided in the depths of his eyes. Had he, too, once stood on the precipice of despair, only to discover an unexpected path? As they crested a rise, the farm materialized, a modest house graced with a wide porch nestled amidst fields of swaying wheat and a compact barn. It wasn't ostentatious, but possessed an inviting warmth, a sense of tranquility that wrapped around Lily like a comforting shawl. Gus barked, a joyful announcement as the wagon came to a halt before the house. Silas dismounted, then offered Lily his hand. As their fingers brushed, a subtle spark, undeniable in its presence, passed between them. Lily quickly drew back, startled by the unexpected sensation. Welcome home, Silas murmured, his gaze holding hers for a fleeting moment. Then he turned and led the way toward the house, Gus trotting eagerly beside him. Lily followed, her heart echoing with a mix of trepidation and nascent hope. Perhaps against all odds she had found a sanctuary in this quiet corner of the world. Life on the farm. The initial days settled into an unexpected routine for Lily. Silas, with a quiet, almost fluid efficiency, familiarized her with farm life. Milking, gathering warm eggs, and tending the garden overseen by Gus became small acts of resistance against the crushing grief. The labor was genuine, grounding, and strangely liberating. Her hands, once accustomed to delicate embroidery, now toughened from handling tools and fodder. Silas was patient and unobtrusive, offering calm instructions and then allowing her space to learn. He never uttered Thomas's name, never touched upon her former existence, a silence for which she felt immeasurable gratitude. One afternoon, while collecting eggs, a particularly temperamental hen delivered a sharp peck. Lily cried out, startled more than injured, and Silas, who had been repairing the fence, hurried to her side. His inspection of her hand was surprisingly tender, followed by a rare smile. That's Henrietta, he chuckled, indicating the culprit. She's got a disposition. Gloves are advisable when collecting from her. Slightly flustered, Lily couldn't suppress a laugh, a sound of genuine mirth unlike the brittle echoes that had haunted her since the train station. The sound danced across the farmyard, reverberating against the barn's time-worn walls and the distant tree line. Silas's smile deepened, a true warmth illuminating his eyes. Sensing the shift in the air, Gus thumped his tail against the ground. Laughter became a more frequent sound around the farm. It resonated within the quiet farmhouse as Lily experimented with baking, her creations often sporting scorched edges and uneven shapes. Silas, initially hesitant, willingly served as the taster, offering gentle encouragement with each bite. Even the worst attempts were met with perhaps a bit more sugar next time. Martha Higgins, observant and sharp-tongued, had taken note. She'd observed Lily hanging laundry, sunlight glinting in her dark hair. She'd witnessed Lily and Silas working together in the fields, their heads bowed in comfortable quiet. And, of course, she'd heard the laughter. Cornering Silas near the flour sacks at the general store, Martha launched her inquiry, her voice a blend of concern and thinly veiled nosiness. "Silas Harding," she began, "that girl. Lily, isn't it? She's been staying with you a good spell now. Folks are starting to talk." Silas shifted, his jaw tightening. He knew the gossip that thrived in Harmony Creek. "Lily's assisting me with the farm," he stated, his tone even. Martha arched a skeptical brow. "Assisting, is it? Or something more?" Silas met her gaze, unflinching. "Lily is a guest in my home, Martha, and a valuable worker. That is all." He collected his flour and turned to leave, but Martha pressed on. "A young woman like that alone. And you a widower. It's only natural for folks to wonder." Her voice dripped with implication. Silas halted, his back stiff. Without turning, he said, his voice a near whisper, "People can wonder what they like, but they don't know Lily. And they don't know me." He departed, leaving Martha to her speculation. Back at the farm, Lily hummed as she hung a freshly laundered quilt. The afternoon sun warmed her skin, and the scent of wildflowers permeated the air. She felt a sense of serenity she hadn't believed possible, a sense of connection. Gus lay at her feet, resting his head on her shoe. From the porch, Silas watched her, his expression inscrutable. He was aware of the town's whispers, their judgments. He couldn't control their gossip, but he could provide Lily with sanctuary, a place for her to heal. And perhaps in doing so, he might discover some healing for himself. The return of Thomas. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the barnyard as Lily scrubbed the last of the mud from a carrot. The air, thick with the scent of hay and damp earth, usually brought her a sense of peace. But today, a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She couldn't explain it. A prickling unease that had settled over her since breakfast. Gus, usually sprawled lazily in the sun, sat upright, his ears twitching. He let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on the lane leading to the farm. Lily followed his line of sight, her heart leaping into her throat. A buggy, pulled by a familiar chestnut mare, was kicking up dust as it approached. Thomas. He hadn't even bothered to send a letter, a telegram, anything. And now here he was. Silas, who had been repairing a fence a short distance away, straightened, his hammer falling silent. He didn't speak, but his posture shifted, a subtle tension entering his frame. The buggy screeched to a halt and Thomas Blackwood hopped down, a practiced smile plastered on his face. He smoothed down his waistcoat and strode towards Lily, his eyes, the same shade of muddy brown as the creek after a storm, darting nervously towards Silas. "Lily, my dearest Lily, there you are." He reached for her hand, but she snatched it away, wiping it on her apron. "Thomas," she said, her voice flat. "What are you doing here?" I came to explain, of course. To apologize." He gestured vaguely towards the buggy. "There were unforeseen circumstances." Silas moved closer, slowly, deliberately. He didn't say a word, but his presence was a palpable force, a silent warning. Thomas cleared his throat, avoiding Silas's gaze. "There was a family emergency. My Aunt Matilda, she took terribly ill. I had to rush to her side. It was quite distressing." Lily stared at him, incredulous. "Aunt Matilda? The same Aunt Matilda who disowned you after you gambled away her inheritance?" Thomas's smile faltered. "Well, yes, but family is family, isn't it? And she needed me. I couldn't just abandon her." Gus growled again, a low rumble in his chest. "And you couldn't send a message?" Lily asked, her voice rising. "You left me at the train station, Thomas. Alone. With nothing. I tried. I swear I did. But the telegraph lines were down. The roads were flooded. It was a perfect storm of unfortunate events." He spread his hands, feigning helplessness. "But I'm here now, Lily. That's what matters. I'm ready to fulfill our agreement. He looked pointedly at Silas. Our marriage agreement. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Silas remained silent, his eyes fixed on Thomas, a storm brewing behind their calm surface. Thomas stepped closer to Lily, lowering his voice. Come now, Lily. Don't be difficult. We're betrothed. Think of the scandal if you don't honor our commitment. What will people say? I don't care what people say, Lily retorted, her voice trembling with anger. You left me, Thomas. You didn't care about me then, and I doubt you care about me now. He reached out and tried to take her hand again, but Silas stepped forward, placing himself between them. He was a head taller than Thomas, broader, his presence radiating a quiet strength that seemed to shrink Thomas's bravado. She doesn't want to talk to you, Silas said, his voice low and steady. Thomas scoffed. This is between Lily and me. It's a family matter. She's living here, Silas replied, his gaze unwavering. She's under my protection. Thomas's face flushed red. Protection? What are you implying? He glanced around nervously, as if expecting the entire town to materialize and witness the confrontation. I demand to speak with Lily alone. Lily looked from Thomas to Silas, her mind racing. She felt a strange sense of protectiveness towards Silas, a fierce desire to shield him from Thomas's manipulative games. There's nothing to discuss, Thomas, she said, her voice gaining strength. I'm not going anywhere with you. Thomas's jaw tightened. You'll regret this, Lily. You'll regret it. He turned to Silas, his eyes narrowed. You think you've won, old man? This isn't over. He turned on his heel and stomped back to his buggy, climbing in with a frustrated huff. He flicked the reins and the buggy lurched forward, disappearing down the lane in a cloud of dust, leaving Lily and Silas standing in the gathering twilight. Choosing her own path. The door's violent clap still reverberated in the tranquil kitchen. Thomas's empty words, his frantic excuses, clung to the air like a cloying perfume. Lily sought refuge against the sink's cool enamel, its floral design swimming before her eyes. She squeezed them shut, fighting to erase the phantom sensation of his touch, the falseness that permeated him like a cheap dye. It wasn't merely desertion, the blatant disregard for her heart. It was the stark recognition that she'd been prepared to accept so much less. To pledge herself to a man she barely knew, a man who viewed her as a stepping stone. A wave of queasiness rolled through her. Gus pressed against her hand, a deep purr rumbling in his chest. She knelt, burying her face in his thick coat, finding solace in his familiar, earthy scent. He proved a truer companion than Thomas ever had. Her gaze shifted to the window, drinking in the fields gilded by the late afternoon sun. Silas stood there, repairing a section of the fence, his movements measured and calm. A quiet strength emanated from him, a steadfastness that drew her in ways she couldn't articulate. She recalled the gentle way he'd offered comfort, the unspoken understanding mirrored in his eyes. No pressure, no demands, no manipulative ploys with counterfeit promises. Simply presence. A sanctuary in the storm. An unexpected warmth unfurled in her chest, a sensation so novel it caught her off guard. It bore no resemblance to the tepid affection she'd mistaken for love with Thomas, the dutiful respect she'd been taught to foster. This was something altogether different. Potent and vibrant. The realization struck her with a force that both frightened and thrilled. She could not marry Thomas. The very idea now felt like a deep betrayal. Not just to herself, but to the nascent hope blooming within her. A hope inextricably interwoven with the quiet farmer and his devoted dog. She rose abruptly, a newfound determination stealing her gaze. She refused to be a pawn in Thomas's game. She would not sacrifice her happiness on the altar of obligation. She would forge her own destiny. She found Thomas striding back and forth near the gate, scuffing at the dirt. He glanced up as she approached, a glint of anticipation in his features. Lily, he began, his voice dripping with an artificial sincerity that set her teeth on edge. I've been considering. Don't, she cut him off, her voice surprisingly firm. Don't say another syllable, Thomas. He blinked, taken aback by her tone. What do you mean? I mean that I will not marry you, she declared, the words sharp and clear against the backdrop of the afternoon. I can't. I don't want to. Color flooded his face. You can't be serious. We have an understanding. An understanding built on falsehoods and manipulation, she retorted, her voice gaining strength. I was naive to believe you, to think you valued anything beyond your own ambition. Lily, be reasonable, he implored, his tone softening, a tactic she now recognized for what it was. Think of our families, of the opportunities. I'm thinking of myself, she stated, her gaze unwavering. For once, I'm choosing what I desire. And what I desire is not you. Silas had paused his work, leaning on the fence, observing them with a quiet intensity. Gus stood sentinel at his side, ears perked, a low growl, a warning tremor in his throat. Thomas's eyes narrowed, his charming veneer cracking to reveal the cold calculation beneath. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You'll be nothing without me." "I may possess nothing now," she replied, "but I retain my self-respect. And that's more than you'll ever have." She turned and walked back towards the farmhouse, her steps sure and determined. She could feel Thomas's heated stare boring into her back, yet she refused to waver. Reaching the fence, Silas straightened, his eyes meeting hers. There was no censure in his gaze, only a silent acknowledgement. He didn't utter a word, but his presence offered a profound reassurance, a promise of unwavering support. She offered him a small, hesitant smile, the first genuine smile she had experienced in days. And as she looked at him, at the man who had bestowed kindness and refuge without expectation, she knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her spirit, that she had made the right choice. She had chosen her own path. Standing together, dust devils danced around Thomas's gleaming boots as he ascended the porch steps, his expression a study in suppressed outrage. Lily stood framed in the doorway, Silas a reassuring bulwark at her back, his hand a light anchor on her shoulder. Even Gus, typically a furry fountain of cheer, stood statue still, a low rumble vibrating in his throat. "Lily, what is the meaning of this charade?" Thomas barked, his tone laced with a venom she hadn't known he possessed. Martha Higgins, caught mid-sprinkle, held her trowel aloft like a frozen conductor's baton, her eyes gleaming with morbid fascination. Lily drew herself up straighter, Silas's touch a quiet source of resolve. "It means, Thomas, that our engagement is over." A scoff erupted from Thomas, a harsh, grating sound. "Don't be absurd, Lily. You're merely overwrought. You'll regain your senses." He reached for her, but Silas moved with quiet speed, an unyielding barrier. "Lily has made her decision, Thomas," Silas stated, his voice a low thrum of conviction that seemed to bounce off Thomas's arrogance. Thomas's eyes narrowed, darting between Lily and Silas. "And who appointed you the gatekeeper? Some hayseed playing at heroism? Lily deserves better than a life of tilling soil." Silas didn't so much as blink. "Lily deserves respect, Thomas. A courtesy you seem to have misplaced." Gus's growl deepened, morphing into sharp, staccato barks, a canine warning escalating rapidly. He edged forward, positioning himself between Lily and Thomas, teeth flashing. Thomas recoiled, a flicker of genuine fear betraying his facade. He clearly underestimated the resistance he'd face, this unified front of defiance. "Control your cur," Thomas snapped, his face flushing crimson. Lily rested a hand on Gus's head, her voice unwavering. "He's protecting me, Thomas, a role you've consistently neglected." The air thrummed with unspoken threats. Martha Higgins, emboldened by the spectacle, now had company, a small gallery of curious neighbors. The slow burn of humiliation began to etch itself onto Thomas's features. "Lily, I am willing to overlook this temporary lapse in judgment," he said, his voice suddenly silken, attempting to rekindle his practiced charm. "We can bury this incident. Consider our families, our shared future." A wave of nausea churned in Lily's stomach. It always revolved around him, around appearances, around preserving his image. "There is no our anymore, Thomas. I understood that standing alone at the train depot. You were absent. And even if you had arrived, I now realize that the us you presented was merely a reflection of your inflated ego." She stepped forward, peeling herself away from Silas's protective presence, locking eyes with Thomas. "I believed I loved you, Thomas. I imagined you as my future. But I was mistaken. You don't cherish me. You're enamored with the idea of me, the vision of a compliant wife who will enhance your standing." Thomas's composure finally shattered. "You'll rue this day, Lily. You'll crawl back, begging for a second chance." Silas advanced again, his gaze drilling into Thomas. "Leave, Thomas, before I make you regret staying." The threat hung in the air, unvoiced yet palpable. Thomas, perhaps for the first time, truly saw Silas not as a simple farmer, but as a man capable of decisive action, a man with nothing binding him. He glared at Lily, his eyes dark with venom. "You've made a grave error, Lily. A colossal one." He spat on the parched earth near her feet, then pivoted and stalked back towards the road, his shoulders squared in defeat. Gus barked once more, a triumphant note that reverberated through the suddenly hushed air. Martha Higgins and her fellow rubberneckers rapidly dispersed, their murmurs carrying on the breeze, eager to disseminate the juicy tidbit. Lily watched Thomas until his figure dissolved into the heat haze shimmering above the road. A tide of exhaustion threatened to engulf her, but beneath it, a nascent sense of liberation bloomed. She had done it. She had finally asserted herself. She turned to Silas, his eyes mirroring quiet understanding. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice thick with unshed tears. He simply nodded, his hand giving her shoulder a brief, reassuring squeeze. "You were strong, Lily." Gus nudged her hand with his cold, wet nose, his tail tentatively thumping against her leg. Lily knelt down, enveloping him in her arms, burying her face in his thick fur. He was her loyal companion, her steadfast protector, a symbol of the burgeoning life she was cultivating in Harmony Creek. A life where she was empowered to be her authentic self, free from manipulation and pretense, free to chart her own course. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she experienced a profound, unwavering sense of peace. A new beginning. Dust devils danced around Thomas's departing figure, a miniature tempest mirroring the devastation he'd wrought. Lily watched him go, a curious detachment blanketing her usual anger. It was finished. Truly. The gilded cage she'd nearly entered dissolved, leaving her exposed yet liberated. Silas's touch, a feather-light pressure on her arm, offered solace without words. Turning to him, she felt a wave of gratitude potent enough to drown her. Gus, stationed by Silas's leg, offered his unwavering gaze. His warm, intelligent eyes seemed to grasp the enormity of the situation, a silent, steadfast support Thomas had never provided. "You all right, Lily?" Silas's voice, a low rumble, held genuine concern. She offered a tremulous smile. "Better than all right, Silas. I think. I'm finally seeing things as they are." He simply nodded, his gaze unwavering. The silence that followed was comfortable, familiar. Then a slight shift in his posture, a crease etching itself onto his brow. He glanced down, then met her eyes once more, a wellspring of emotion visible within their depths. "Lily," he began, his voice laced with a subtle tension. He drew a breath, then continued, "These past weeks, you being here, it's been good. Insufficient, really. It's been. I never imagined I'd feel this way again." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Silas was a man of few words, each carefully weighed. Such candid vulnerability was exceptional. He retrieved something from his pocket, his work-roughened fingers momentarily clumsy before producing a small, exquisitely crafted wooden box. Time-worn, yet polished to a gentle luster, though it radiated warmth. He opened it, revealing a simple, silver band. Devoid of ostentation, its unadorned elegance spoke volumes. "This belonged to my mother," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'd never envisioned giving it away. But Lily, will you stay? Remain here, with me? Become my wife, my partner, my family?" The question hung suspended in the air, saturated with unspoken hopes and aspirations. Lily searched Silas's face, seeking any trace of uncertainty. She found only a quiet, enduring affection. Tears welled, blurring her vision. Not tears of sorrow or regret, but an outpouring of unadulterated joy. Her hand trembling, she reached for his. "Yes," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, Silas, yes, I will." A slow, heartening smile illuminated Silas's face, transforming his weathered features. A smile that reached his soul, radiating a warmth that banished his customary stoicism. He clasped her hand in both of his grip firm and reassuring. He slid the ring onto her finger, perfect fit, as though predestined to reside there. Gus offered a single joyful bark, nudging Lily's hand with his cold, wet nose. Kneeling, she embraced him, burying her face in his thick fur. Silas drew her up, his eyes alight with happiness. "Come on," he said, a newfound lightness in his tone. "Let's head home." He lifted her small bag, placing it in the wagon's rear. Gus leaped in beside it, settling down with a contented sigh. Silas assisted Lily onto the seat, then settled beside her, the reins resting loosely in his hand. A gentle encouragement to the horses, and the wagon lurched forward, commencing its journey back to the farm. Glancing back, Lily saw the Harmony Creek station diminish into a distant speck, a symbol of the life she was abandoning, a life that had never truly been hers. She faced forward once more, her gaze fixed upon the unfolding road. A new path, fraught with uncertainty, yet brimming with hope and the promise of better things. And she would not traverse it alone. Beside her sat Silas, his presence a solid anchor amidst her turbulent emotions. In the wagon's rear, Gus kept watch, a silent sentinel guarding their nascent happiness. They were a family, forged not by blood, but by affection, fidelity, and a shared yearning for a life founded on integrity and connection. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the heavens in vibrant shades of apricot, rose, and lavender. The air carried the fragrance of hay and wildflowers, a sweet, earthy aroma that filled Lily's lungs and eased her spirit. As they journeyed onward, the rhythmic cadence of the horses' hooves provided a steady counterpoint to the silence. Lily felt a profound sense of tranquility descend. She rested her head against Silas's shoulder, and he drew her close, enveloping her in his embrace. This was it, her fresh start, and she eagerly anticipated the journey ahead.